I'm Dr. Susan Galletly of Central Queensland University, and I'm going to be talking to you now on the topic of orthographies, bunyips, Blindspots and bright futures. And if you'd like to, do download the handout, which has got all the slides, 6 per page, and lots of space for note taking, because I've got lots that I want to tell you, and I do speak rather quickly. Okay, but everything from here is on that handout. Okay, on we go. There is very good news. Australia is a nation with exciting potential for truly major improvement in early literacy development when kids learn to read and write, and education generally, if we explore 10 changes issues. And considering the research really does show that we too can soar. And you could replace Australia there with America, with UK, with New Zealand, and what have you, Anglophone nations who are currently struggling to improve early literacy development and literacy outcomes. Okay, cognitive load and cognitive processing, they really are major players in learning to read and write. So cognitive load is the amount we have to think on and process, not just at any one time, but over time. So it's the amount in this moment, in this lesson, in the 4 years that I'm learning to read, and so on. Cognitive processing is the skills that we use in thinking about and processing information, that cognitive load. So cognitive load and cognitive processing, they work in tandem. Easy learning creates easy learning creates low cognitive load and low demands for effective cognitive processing skills. Complex learning creates high cognitive load and really high demands for kids having very effective cognitive processing skills. Okay, and high cognitive load has major negative effects. Now you'll know it yourself, when we're really stressed, some of our skills just bottom out and what have you. So English readers struggle to learn to read and write because they've got too high cognitive load across early literacy development and too high demands for effective cognitive processing skills. And Hayu Thomas et al. In 2004 did a really interesting study, and they showed that increasing cognitive load for healthy progress kids in grade 1 and 2, kids in the UK, okay, it actually induced patterns of language disorder. So these are kids with healthy language skills, increase the cognitive load of the tasks that they're doing, and all of a sudden they're making errors that aren't in keeping with healthy language skills, but are very much in keeping with the patterns that language disordered kids show. Now that's on language skills, but if you think of it, perhaps how much is the same thing happening in literacy? We really do want research on this area. I'm going to be encouraging a lot of research. We'll be discussing research, and I'm saying more research is needed. It can be big studies, it can be small studies, but there is so much that we can do to build knowledge on the important areas that we'll be discussing. Okay, on we go. I'm going to skim this session's abstract. I'm just going to read it quickly to give you an idea of it, and then we're going to go through it slowly, interspersing it with research and different concepts and what have you. Okay, orthographies, Blindspots, bunyips and bright futures, exploring our potential for improvement. Let's end our epidemic of language, literacy and learning difficulties, the epidemic that so many other nations don't have. Why do our teachers, schools and children struggle so much? While many factors are involved, too little attention has been paid to the very major impacts on early literacy development, on teaching pressure and on difficulties achieving improvement of 1, English orthographic complexity, and 2, the weak cognitive processing skills that our 4.5 to 5-year-olds have when they're learning to read and write. Nations differ in orthographic complexity, in how regular their spelling is, and they thus differ in ease of learning to read and write. So many nations, and I'm talking lots and lots of nations, for example Finland, use highly regular orthographies, okay? Almost no spelling patterns beyond one sound for each letter, okay? So learning to read and write is easy and rapid, and we'll look at that. And word reading and spelling difficulties are minimal. When I say minimal, okay. In strong contrast, high orthographic complexity impedes English early literacy development, making it extremely slow, difficulties far more frequent and far more severe. Regular orthography delayed word readers catch up. Anglophone children, schools, and education in general struggle because we've got too many kids with weak literacy skills in our primary schools and high schools. So nations with complex orthographies such as Taiwan, Japan, Korea and China, now their orthographies, their spelling systems are way harder than ours, okay, but they now achieve impressively easy, successful literacy development. Why? Because in the 1940s and 50s they changed. They said enough is enough, changed to two-stage early literacy. Orthography is far more complicated than English. They had massive issues with illiteracy and how long it took to learn to read and write because learning was so complex. Not now though. 1940s and 50s each added in a fully regular beginner's orthography that kids use when they first learn to read and write. China's Pinyin, Japan's Hiragana, Taiwan's Bopomofo, and so on. It's used, Korean Hangul, yep. It's used when children first learn to read and write and then to transition them easily to reading their complex orthography. When? Not when they're 4.5 and just starting, but when they're confident, literate learners. And it doesn't take long, 10 weeks, that sort of thing. This session explores research showing the impressive ease of regular orthography early literacy and Anglophone nations' struggles. For example, with far slower reading and writing development. Intellectual disability having minor impacts in regular orthography nations, massive impacts on word reading development, reading and writing development. Impressive versus sadly low effectiveness of catch-up intervention, and indications that the regular orthography weaker readers are reading better than at least half and perhaps 2/3 of English readers. Change is needed. Okay. It also explores the relevance, potential and evidence base of Galletly's proposed 10 changes. So I've been looking at this for ages and looking at what should we do. I've been visiting schools and researchers in different nations across the world, talking with teachers, talking with researchers, and when I've pulled it right down, I've come up with 10 changes that we need to explore. They are not musts. They are 10 issues that we need to consider, do research, and check out their potential, because the potential that they offer is enormous. Okay, let's have a look at those 10. Number 1, understand how orthographies matter. English spelling is dragging us down, and it's only when you look at other nations that you really see how far dragged down we are. Number 2, own our struggling reader woes. End hypocrisy and pretense. That's far more an Australian change than a UK and a USA change, where children's rights are met more effectively. That would be an interesting study, the extent to which children's rights are met in Finland, Taiwan, America, UK, Australia. Own our struggling reader woes. End hypocrisy and pretense. Number 3, weigh workload. Our children and teachers are working far too hard, far too hard. Number 4, one-size education does not fit all. Teach to the decidedly different instructional needs of upper third and lower third readers. Number 5, end our data deficiency, another Australian one. Build strong knowledge on kids' word reading levels. Number 6, enrich every child. Ensure effective, supportive, tailored education. In fact, the education that our acts, documents, UN agreements, and what have you promise our children that we currently aren't delivering. Number 7, insist on easy literacy development. Reach regular orthography nations' achievement levels, not their achievement levels in exceptional skills. Reach the level that nations such as Taiwan, Japan, and China are achieving routinely in every school across the nation. Okay, it's a big ask, and it's also ethical. Is it appropriate that our kids' biggest risk factor for very slow reading and writing development and high likelihood of learning difficulties and high likelihood that those difficulties will continue, their major risk factor is being born in Australia or another Anglophone nation that's not managing orthographic complexity effectively? There could be research on ethical issues there. Number 8, investigate the potential of fully regular beginners' orthographies. They're winners, and we'll look at the research there. Number 9, play to learn first. Start standard English word reading instruction from mid-year 2. Where has play gone in Australian schools? Okay, we are working our children far too hard. Okay, when you go to, we'll look at the data on Finland and what have you nations. Those European nations, their kids aren't starting grade 1 until they're 7 and close to 8. Okay, and they're learning to read the world's easiest orthographies, whereas we are loading our kids with one of the world's most complex orthographies when they're only 4.5 to 5 years with underdeveloped cognitive processing skills, especially if they've got risk factors. Let's play to learn first. Okay, and number 10, build needed research knowledge as quickly as possible. Use collaborative, school-based research. On we go. And the future is bright. Let's move there. Let's look at these issues. Let's have chats. Talk with your colleagues. Talk with your friends. Plan a trip overseas. Visit some regular orthography nations. Organise a swap. And when you're there in those schools, always say, could you show us the children who are the weakest readers? Would you mind if they read a little bit for us? Okay, and would we be able to look at their workbooks? And you will see them and you will go, oh my goodness, they're literate. Wow, they're really literate. Okay, perhaps go and look at the same thing in Australia first. Okay, so we're a nation in need of major improvement, and fortunately, working strategically, we're also a nation with excellent potential to achieve that improvement. Okay, we've gone through we've gone quickly through the abstract. Now we're going to go through and look at the slides now. We're going to walk through and we'll find orthographies, bunyips, Blindspots and bright futures. What's a bunyip? Okay, well, an elephant in the room is something we're all aware of that we're embarrassed about. A bunyip in the room is something that we haven't been aware of. But when we become aware of it, we go, oh, wow. Okay, and my first book of the 3 that I'm writing is called Bunyips in the Classroom, the 10 Changes, because we've got lots of educational issues that we really need to look at using an orthographic complexity and cross-national or cross-linguistic lens, thinking on how things are happening in other nations and how they're happening in Anglophone nations. Okay, on we go. So let's end that epidemic of language literacy and learning difficulties. Nations differ in orthographic complexity. What's an orthography? A spelling system. Nations choose the orthographies they use. Ours is excessively complex. Other nations use highly regular orthographies. They use it either as their sole orthography, so a lot of the European nations, African nations, our indigenous orthographies, okay, they are single, highly regular orthographies, highly regular, can be learned very, very quickly, okay. Other nations, China, Japan and Taiwan, use 2 orthographies. They keep their complex orthography, but they add in that beginner's orthography, which makes them a regular orthography nation too. And then there's us. Okay, so regular orthographies, one-to-one matching of letters and sounds, very little to master, to read and write. Children are very quickly independent readers and writers. And looking at that circular diagram, what do the kids need? Well, one, it's the alphabetic principle. You need to know your letter sounds and you need your phonemic awareness skills. So what does k, at, t say? Oh, cat, that's phonemic awareness. Or if you want to spell cat, oh, that's got k, at, t. And you're right. That's phonemic awareness, being able to list the sounds, blend the sounds and what have you. Okay, and on the right, I've put FlexiSpell. Now that's an orthography that I've developed. It's free to use for non-commercial use and you can change it. It's just one for educators and researchers to play with. I gave myself a weekend to develop an orthography because these things can become an obsession. And I actually made it a 6-stage orthography, so a fully regular one, and then stages for transitioning children through to standard English. And those stages are quite a nice sequence for chunking learning. The Asian nations, they chunk learning beautifully so that to keep cognitive load low and manageable. We could really learn from them. And if you let's read that text on the top right under FlexiSpell stage 1. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs who lived in a cottage with their mother. One day, Mother Pig said to her kids, "It's time for you to build your own houses." So off they went. And you can see it's fairly similar. And if you look down below, we've got AE with underlined is going to be our long A, so mate, cake, okay? Just a plain A is going to be A, and what have you. And yeah, the consonants, SH for sh, and I've used underlining to show that the E and the R go together, so it's not it's going to be TH is not to her, it's going to be th. Okay, and so once the kids have learned those letter sounds, okay, they can head on in. Okay, and so let's keep reading. The first little pig met a farmer with a load of straw. Please, could I have some of your straw? The pig asked politely, because you know what? There's no need to dumb text down so that kids can read it. You don't need to use repeated sentences. The picture illustrations don't have to hugely support the kids' reading because the kids can read. Okay, and it's building their cognitive processing skills, their executive function skills, phonemic awareness, orthographic awareness, lots of lovely stuff. The skills that they need to then move smoothly into and master English, standard English, with our 13 ways of writing or and what have you. Okay, certainly, because big words are fine, you fine young pig, answered the farmer, who gave the little pig as much straw as he wanted. Okay, very powerful. Kids learn it quickly and they can read and write very quickly. Okay, so English is a highly complex orthography, 26 letters for over 40 sounds, using well over 560 spelling patterns, complex learning, lots to master, and ongoing high cognitive load across the years that it takes to build those word reading skills. So many Aussies and kids in other nations are going to struggle, and teachers have to provide lots of support. Teachers' unions, we need to be doing research on workload in regular orthography nations and Australia, okay? More so Australia, because our teachers aren't getting the supports that teachers in America and UK get for children who've got reading disability. Okay, the difference is phenomenal. And just have a look at that diagram there, Standard English Word Reading Development. Now, all of the diagrams and what have you, they're from my recently released book, The Research Tours, The Impacts of Orthographic Disadvantage, where I have gone through and analysed lots of relevant research and discussed it. While it is an academic book, it's written for the interested general public, and particularly for teachers and those thinking of doing teaching and what have you. It's logical, easy to read, no complex statistics or anything like that. You'll enjoy it, okay? And it discusses all the research that I'm including here and lots more. Okay, and I'll just draw your attention to that graph on the right-hand side, and we'll come back to that again, okay? It's from a study that my colleagues and I did, where we measured the word reading skills of children from grade 1 through to high school. And so this is just showing year 1, year 3, year 5 and year 7 children. Now do you see how it zeroes, all comes back to a low 6-year reading level. And what's happening there is our severest kids aren't progressing, okay? And probably our weakest 2% to 5% are our most major undoing, and our bottom 10%. Even if we taught the best of phonics, we'd quite likely still have we still would have very, very slow word reading and spelling development, and we would probably still have that 10% very major struggles. We'd reduce our proportion of children with major struggles. So we need more, which is why I think we need to look at beginners' orthographies and their potential, because my goodness, their potential is amazing. Okay, most nations use regular orthographies. So let's have a look at it in table form. English, 26 letters, 44 sounds, between 560 and 1100 spelling patterns, depending on the definition you use. I'm relatively conservative. I say well over 560, probably about 800, using the rules that I use. Okay, Finnish, 23 letters, 23 sounds. Now they say they've got 23 spelling patterns, but when you go there, you'll sort of say, but what about this? What about this? But it's less than 30 spelling patterns. Wow. So learn your letter sounds and you can read and write, okay? Italian, same thing, 22 letters, 25 sounds, and 33 spelling patterns. Korean, 24, 24, 24. Welsh, 29, 29, and approximately 29. And English spelling is so complex, okay, that researchers consider it an outlier on the continuum of orthographic complexity. So it's not one standard deviation, 2 or 3, it is out there. And we're asking our 4.5 to 5-year-olds with very immature cognitive processing skills to learn to read that world's most complex orthography. It's not the world's most complex, Thai is more complex. Okay, on we go. Our challenge, while we've got strong readers who do well, too many of our kids struggle. We've definitely got strong readers. Why did we score so well in PISA 2000 and 2003? Before the regular orthography nations started putting their improvement agendas into gear and our schools got even more pressured. We scored well because our strong readers' excellent scores compensated impressively for our many weak readers' low skills, particularly obvious in the PISA 2000, okay? And unfortunately over the years, our number of high achievers has dropped as our number of low achievers has risen and what have you. And our schools are working so hard to improve, but our schools are woefully under-resourced and what have you. And we're struggling with the damage that English does to our little E's. Okay, too many of our at-risk and weak readers genuinely struggle, and we see that vividly when we compare English readers with similar cohorts in regular orthography nations, okay? And almost all of our children take at least 10 times longer to learn to read and spell, okay, than kids in many nations, because for our kids, so let's use Finland. Their children reach adult level accuracy for word reading and spelling early in grade 1, okay? Our children reach a reasonable level 6 years on, so if they start at age, is it 6? No, now we're starting at 5, so 7 years on when they're about 12, okay? But it's still not adult level, okay? And for spelling, it's when they're 15, so all those years, wow, okay? It may be 10 to 25 times longer, okay? We want research, okay? Anglophone nations have their worrying, long, sad tale of underachievers, okay? And regular orthography nations don't have it, okay? They actually move from, I can't read, to, oh, I can read. If you talk to someone, like for example, someone I spoke to in Finland, and he said, yes, I can remember the moment that I learned to read. Wow. I was sitting in the kitchen and I was looking at whatever Mum was cooking, and I said to her, does this say? And she said, yes. And I thought, oh, I can do it. Now see, I can remember that moment for when I learned to ride a bike. I can learn it for when I learned to swim, but not for reading, because it was a long, slow progression, okay? At a Finnish kindergarten, I asked teachers if they'd encountered this, and the teacher said, oh, yes. She said, just the other day, there was a girl in the cloakroom, and I wondered if she was upset because she was staying there. And I went in, and she was looking at some words up on the wall, and Finnish words are very long. And she said, oh, does that say? And I said, yes. And on she went, you know. This realisation of, oh my goodness, I can do this. And we start slowly and we build up speed and away we go. Okay, now let's have a look at these two graphs, and they're from the research tours, okay? On the left-hand side, we've got Welsh versus English, okay? And just going by the means and standard deviations, can you see the light grey and how it is? Let me just see the light grey and how their curve is here. So their kids are mean, 1 standard deviation below, 2 standard, you know, and so we're talking even their weakest 1% of kids is miles up compared to our kids, because here, here's our mean and here's our 1 standard, you know, okay, it's huge. And those authors comment, Hanley et al., about this tail of low achievers that starts from grade 1, okay, and it's big and it stays big, whereas the Welsh kids, no tail, okay. The kids who are weak progress steadily and they get there, okay. On the right-hand side, we've got German versus English, because German is highly regular for, more so for word reading than for spelling, and here we've got German real words, German unfamiliar words, so wow, they're doing pretty well. And here we've got the kids at, oh, this is only the weak readers, okay? So the kids 1 standard deviation below, okay, so that's about 16% of kids. So sorry, you've got 50% of kids, okay? About 16% are in that between the mean and the 1st standard deviation, okay? And then, you know, we're going to head down and only a small proportion, okay? The kids, what have you. So here, yep, they're still achieving, and then they just bottom out, you know, for both the real words and the unfamiliar words, whereas the German weak readers, they're doing well. In fact, they're doing very well. Okay, and our long sad tale of underachievers also shows in writing. So, when I was in Finland the first time, I could not convince the teachers that their kids' spelling was excellent. Oh, no, our kids' spelling is terrible. Now, they're talking about whether they put the two dots over the vowel versus leave it unchanged, And I said, oh, come to Australia and I'll show you terrible spelling. Okay, so the next time I went, I made sure I took some, and I did a 12-minute writing task, 2 minutes planning, and then 10 minutes writing on things I like about school. So over here we have our Australian examples of weaker writers. Here we have our Ugandan children, high levels of multilingualism. They're learning English as a fifth language probably, and education is in English, but quite impressive writing, okay? And this is kids from Estonia, okay? Hang on, have I got the right one? English top left, Estonia top right, Estonia and Uganda, okay? And the difference is there in attitude too. The Estonian children, the Ugandan children were speaking very positively about school, but so many of the children in Australia were dispirited. I like 3 o'clock, I like the school holidays and what have you. And you think, oh my goodness, what are we doing? Okay, and on we go. Emeritus Professor, okay, UNESCO Chair, Heikki Luutinen, okay, he was the leader of Finland's Uvascular longitudinal dyslexia study. Oh, we would learn so much if we looked at that study and replicated it here in Australia. Okay, and he is currently expanding use of GraphoLearn technology. So GraphoGame and Comprehension Game across nations, and GraphoGame led directly out of the Uvascular longitudinal study. Okay, and he wrote the foreword to the research tours, and he discusses Finnish early literacy development and GraphoGame, Comprehension Game, and what have you. And he emphasises, and I've used this quote on the cover of the book, okay, across nations we need to be discussing orthographies. Their impacts on education are often overlooked. While many nations use highly transparent orthographies, English is highly complex. Orthographic impacts and cross-linguistic differences are major, with widespread ramifications. And let's have a look at some of them now. And often researchers will talk about transparent versus opaque orthographies. English is an opaque orthography on the opaque end, because often it's hard to read words such as one, eight, was, and what have you. It's relatively opaque. Whereas the regular orthography nations are beautifully transparent. Know your letter sounds, and oh my goodness, you can just read it. The words the content becomes visible because you can so easily access the words. Okay, so and this is some text from that forward. In Finland, letter names and sounds are highly consistent, every letter name emphasising the letter's sound, which is not the case for English. Most Finnish children attend kindergarten at age 6 years, and there they learn letters and their sounds using play-based learning and with much exposure to words and letters. For example, classroom walls display letters in motivating ways. Children who know all letters are usually proficiently accurate 2 months into grade 1, while those not knowing all letters can struggle. And I was talking with Heikki in a Zoom meeting last week, and I said, well, what percent, and sure enough it fits with the other research studies, he said, what percent struggle with word reading? And he said, 3%. Okay, so they're talking 97% of children are reading well 2 months into grade 1 adult level word reading and spelling. Okay. When dynamic assessment shows weak letter knowledge, schools start GraphoGame preventative training. And it's a computer game that's motivating and fun, and it helps kids learn their letters and how to sound out letters for reading and spelling and what have you. Most at-risk children, so the majority of their children who are weak word readers, catch up to their peers by grade 2. And using GraphoGame, those with severest difficulties read and write accurately by grade 4. So our teachers in high school are struggling because we have got so many weak readers and they don't have the resources to support them. Okay, kids are really struggling. Okay, whereas the severest kids are catching up by grade 4. We need to be looking at this. Okay. Formal letter and reading instruction is not recommended at kindergarten, as at age 6 years, it is a time for playing. And the European nations feel this very strongly, okay? With the exception of the UK, which, like us, starts children off awfully early, okay? So they defend their children's right to play, okay? Whereas we've sort of lost that. Okay, however, those children interested in playing with letters are provided with opportunities to learn letter shapes, their names and sounds, and how to write them to the extent that the child chooses. In earliest reading and writing in Finland, including in grade 1, only capital letters are used with no lowercase letters. This keeps early learning simpler and cognitive load low. Okay, so another way to keep the cognitive load even lower. Okay, impressive, isn't it? Okay. So, orthographic advantage versus disadvantage build from the cognitive load, okay, of learning, workload, how much work there is for kids and teachers to do, and learning ease, how easy it is. Okay, so now if we have a look, up the top, we have got Anglophone nations, okay, and I've called it TESOL, transition from early to sophisticated literacy, okay, and what have you, and here we've got the regular orthography ones. Now this is explained in an article that we've written about it. It's also explained in the research tours, and shortly on my website there will be a short video explaining the models that I've used, and this is one of them. But suffice to say, if we think of stages of home literacy, and then early literacy when you're learning to read and write, and then sophisticated literacy, and if we think of how much time is spent on early literacy versus continuing literacy, which includes let's read wonderful children's literature, let's be doing some science, let's be doing some history, and what have you. If we look down here, look, it's just this tiny little blip is taken. I asked a academic in Finland, how long does it take for your teachers to learn to teach reading and spelling at university? 1 week, yes. Okay, yeah, so this tiny little blip, so all that time is left available, okay, for continuing literacy, for subject area learning, for all the rest, plus transition from early to sophisticated literacy. It's homogenous. The kids, by grade 2, every child is an independent reader, writer and learner. Wouldn't we love that? And wouldn't the workload be so much easier if we didn't have to be teaching spelling across the years, supporting, writing the wording carefully so that kids can read? My goodness, what a difference, okay? Okay, so there's that one. Okay, so our children have high cognitive load across many years. Okay, they're also struggling with early literacy when they're trying to do complicated learning. Okay, so our children and our teachers have much higher workload for subject area and literacy learning because of the extra time needed to build and support developing literacy skills. We have an enormous find the learning time challenge. Our schools are time poor, they are pressure cookers, and our teachers are constantly frustrated knowing they need to be doing remediation, support, what have you, but I've got to cover this content and what have you. Okay, do we need spelling reform? Should we be a sole regular orthography nation? Well, let me tell you a little story, and my answer is no. Okay, but let me give you the Turkey story. Okay, so Ataturk decided on spelling reform because literacy levels were very low, and so they developed their new Turkish orthography. This is back in the 1920s, could have been around 1929, I may not be exact there, but what have you. And he asked his advisors, how long should this take to transition? And his advisors said, approximately 5 years, and nonsense, said the great leader, we will do it in 3 months. And so they had lots of classes, and Ataturk taught a lot of those classes himself because that's how easy it is to learn to read and write, okay? And for 6 months, people in the nation were allowed to use documents written in the old orthography, but at that certain time point, after 6 months, everything had to be changed to the new orthography, and it worked. So that's how easy it is. But, okay, so if we did drastic spelling reform, we too could have the easy, rapid, early literacy development of Finland, Estonia, and so many other nations. We'd be time rich, okay, with teaching and learning of all areas vastly easier. But we don't need to, for many reasons. For example, The time is probably past for such drasticness. Written English is used internationally. It's a flourishing language. If we compared the lower third of adults writing English as a second language with our lower third of Australian adults for reading and writing, okay, the others would win hands down, because in having learned to read and write their first orthography, they've developed wonderful executive function and phonological awareness and orthographic awareness skills that has helped them go on to English. Okay, but the main one is that adding in a beginner's orthography, okay, reaps the benefits of regular orthographies, and it lets you keep your main orthography. Okay, we can keep English, okay, English spelling as is in all its glory, okay, if we would add in a fully regular orthography. And the ITA research, the initial teaching alphabet research, it showed that English beginners orthographies work extremely well at easing and speeding early literacy and at preventing difficulties. So let's look at our role model nations, Taiwan, Japan, Korea and China. Okay, they now achieve impressively easy, successful literacy development because in the 1940s and 50s they changed to two-stage early literacy. Their main orthographies are far more complicated than English, okay, and so boy did they struggle, but not now, okay, because they added in those regular orthographies, okay. China added in Pinyin, Japan hiragana, okay, used when children first learn to read and write and then to transition. It's a transitioning tool too. They're used a lot for second language learning. Okay, like we're sort of doing things back to front with our kids in our isolated Indigenous settlements, because we are asking the kids to learn to read in English, and then often later on, let's have a look at your orthography. Oh my goodness, it's fully regular. Whereas if we did it the other way around and we said no, in these settlements and what have you, children will learn to read their own orthography, their first language first, and then they will have that wonderful tool for learning to read English, and they will also master English so much more easily because of the skills they've built. Okay, so that's what China and what have you did. Now Korea's taken it, well South Korea at least, has taken it fully through. They moved to Hangul after World War II, and they were in a mess. They had a terrible time, but they changed to Hangul. Their emperor had developed it centuries before because of his love for the people and because he wanted to bring literacy to the people, but it hadn't been implemented widely. But then after the war, when Korea was making changes, they introduced Hangul, and it was going to be a beginner's orthography, but now they have actually dropped out their complex orthography from school level reading materials, and I think most newspapers don't use it. So culturally, it's still there, and I think many children do privately learn the main orthography, the major or complicated orthography. Okay, so, and they use their regular orthography first, okay? And now, guys, just go down to that second line. We do two-stage handwriting. So we do two-stage early literacy for handwriting, okay? We do printing, then we do cursive. Now just think of it. We would not start our little ones on that complicated running writing right from the word go. Oh my goodness, far too hard. So let's keep cognitive load low and demands for cognitive processing low. So we start kids on printing first the letters of their name, and don't worry about the lines. Let's just do it, so the kids master the letters, and then we introduce the lines and spacing between the words and what have you. And once the kids are writing and got those basics happening, then we introduce cursive script, running writing. Yeah, okay. That's what the Asian nations have done for reading and writing, okay, and it works just as well, works brilliantly. So it creates super low cognitive load for earliest reading and writing, okay. It doesn't derail children into the path of low success and acquired helplessness where they feel, I can't do this. Okay, once a child in their heart has given up, acquired helplessness or learned helplessness is often called, and it's not, well, yes, read on that, okay, Mayer and Seligman's 2016 article on learned helplessness, because they've revised it. Helplessness is not learned. Helplessness is the default, guaranteed when learners do not experience ongoing success, okay, in initial learning. Sounds like many children in Australia. Okay, so this two-stage early literacy, super low cognitive load. Children build strong cognitive processing skills and confidence and self-teaching, okay, to read and write new words. Okay, and they then transition very effectively to reading and writing their complex orthography. These nations are powerful role models. And may I say, teaching is just so much easier. I mean, Japanese teachers cope extremely well. Okay, classrooms look great when I visited. Okay, with 37 children in grade 1. Okay, whereas we are struggling massively with 25, and really, see, we're using our school resourcing. We're sort of saying, oh, but we spend as much as Taiwan, we spend as much as Finland. Yes, but guess what? In Finland, the children are much older and they're learning to read the world's most easiest regular orthography, and everyone's literate by grade 2. Okay, similar, it's a bit slower in Taiwan, and that's all we need to be doing research. Okay, but miles faster than us. Okay, and we say, well, we're using similar resource levels. No, I mean, we're misusing our orthography, and it creates enormous expense. If we want that luxury, then, and we want to meet our children's rights for effective education, we're going to have to spend a lot more money. Quite likely 2 teachers and a teacher aide for 25 children. Okay, because we need to prevent failure and keep success high. Okay. So, and in those Asian nations, China, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, few children have word reading difficulties, and their difficulties are so minor by Anglophone standards. So here we've got too many Aussies struggle, okay, and oh my goodness, they're coming down sadly low, and a huge range of reading levels. You know, we discussed this in I discussed this in the research tours, but you know, like an 8-year range in grade 3 and yeah, what have you. Okay, meanwhile, in Asia, where they're using 2-stage early literacy, starting the kids off easily, making sure they have success, okay, the levels of word reading difficulty are just so minor. So Hiragana, the beginner's orthography in Japan, 0.2% have reading difficulties with it, and 1.6% have writing difficulties, okay, spelling difficulties there. And then for kanji, their main orthography, 6.9% have word reading difficulties, and 6% have writing. Wouldn't we love those numbers? Okay. Right. Teachers in regular orthography nations are teaching to highly literate learners from grade 2. They are independent readers, writers, and learners. The time saved can be used on subject area learning. They don't have our Find the Learning Time challenge, and they also don't have its associated Find the Caring Time challenge. Okay, and the orthographic advantage proliferates, which can easily, when 97 to 99% of the kids are strong readers and writers. Okay, and this is orthographic advantage theory that Knight, Galletly and Gargett, 2019, our article, but we've been using it for quite some time. Okay, and we are saying that nations have national advantage versus disadvantage because of orthographic differences, okay? And really it's because of differences in the orthographic complexity when children first learn to read and write. Okay, so our major impacting factors over here, extent of cognitive orthographic complexity, and that in turn creates the extent of cognitive load of learning to read and write. Secondary impacting factors, and there are others, children's processing capacity, excellence of instruction, multilingualism, would go in there too, because that builds executive function skills and children are less likely to have reading difficulties. Okay, but so this builds your extent of early education advantage, okay, because there's a fair bit of advantage in Finland with everyone being literate by grade 2, isn't there? Okay, and which we can see in the extent of difficulties learning to read and write and the extent of cognitive load of literacy tasks. Okay, so when I'm doing my science task, okay, with excellent literacy skills, the cognitive load is a whole lot lower for the kids in the regular orthography nations. And then that in turn is going to create our extent of later education advantage. What's teaching and learning going to be like in high school, okay, when your lower third has been reading well since grade 2, versus when we have 1/3 of struggling readers and writers in high school, at least. Okay, and it also impacts the extent of optimising education advantage. Now, Australian teachers will have noticed the pressure to improve outcomes. Okay, it's hard to miss, and we'll also have noticed the lack of improvement there. It is very hard to improve things when you've got so many struggling readers and such pressured schools. it is very easy to improve things when you've got highly literate school population and the time pressure just drastically reduced. And if we take it down further, okay, so we've got early education advantage, later education advantage, optimising education advantage, and then if we come on down, I'm going to work from this side over. Extent of adult life advantage, because adults who are highly literate have, reduced mental health issues, higher employment, higher, everything, okay, the likelihood. Okay, and then we've got the extent of workplace and economic advantage, okay, regular orthography nations save billions on workplace illiteracy issues and what have you. But this is a really big one, extent of generational advantage, okay, because we create cycles of generational advantage, okay, in regular orthography nations, right, and of disadvantage in Anglophone nations. Every time we graduate, or every time a child leaves high school, and the child might feel like a failure, okay, but no, we have failed, okay. There are no such thing. I've used Jackie French's words as a mantra for the books that I'm writing, okay. There are no such thing as reading difficulties. There are only teaching challenges, okay. Regular orthography nations are meeting those challenges. We're not, if our children are leaving school still illiterate. But when we do, those young adults then go on to become parents of the next generation who are nervous of school, nervous of reading, nervous of academic, okay? And yeah, the cycle just continues, okay? China, Japan, Taiwan and Korea just cut that cycle off at the knees because they said, enough. And they introduced their beginner's orthography, and they didn't do it just for classes at school, they did that for adult education as well. And whoosh, and those of you who are old enough will look back and go, oh yes, Japan and Korea, yes, they were an absolute mess after World War II, and look at how those nations have improved since then from the point that they introduced two-stage early literacy. Okay, should we add in a beginner's orthography? Okay, and whereas my answer for spelling reform was no, okay, the answer for this one is quite likely yes. Now, because the 10 changes are not musts, we've had far too much of knee-jerk, changes. Let's do the research, and that would include, let's have groups of teachers from Taiwan come to Australia. Let's have groups of our teachers go there, but always making sure that you include a focus on the lowest third of kids and the lowest 10% of kids. And actually that writing exercise, just getting that writing exercise, 10 minutes, 2 minutes planning, 10 minutes writing on things I like about school, okay? It's a good one, okay? And that's research, particularly if you do have a meeting and do a survey and interview the teachers and what are their learnings and have group discussions and what have you. Have one-day seminars as part of it, okay? There is much to be learned, okay? And really our children deserve it. Okay, yes, so we would choose a beginner's orthography and we wouldn't do too much research on it, okay, because there's research being done in the 1960s, okay. We could use ITA, the ITA Foundation in America is using ITA to good effect. We could use something like FlexiSpell, which is an easy font for typing, but you can get the ITA from the ITA Foundation if you're wanting to use it. Yeah, and we've also got large numbers of regular orthographies in our isolated Aboriginal communities too. So yeah, we need to be talking on this. Okay, and now here's a major important finding. Learning to read and write a beginner's orthography builds powerful phonemic awareness. Okay, it builds orthographic awareness, that's awareness of letters, sounds, reading and writing, but it also builds phonemic awareness, and we'd love to build phonemic awareness quickly. Okay, so children, oops, there's a word missing there. Children rapidly build strong phonemic awareness as they learn to read and write their beginner's orthography. Okay, in the 4 weeks that it takes Finnish children to go from can't read to can, in the 10 weeks that Taiwanese children master their beginner's orthography prior to transitioning to their main orthography. Okay, and it's just some text from the research tools. Just as Arrow 2004 found, Huang and Handley found very strong phonemic awareness development in the 10-week period of mastering their beginner's orthography from being minimal to now being quite proficient. This strong phonemic awareness would now support their learning of complex Hanzi, or for our kids, of complex English. Okay, as Huang and Hanley explain of Taiwan, before they learn any characters, so the complex orthography, all Taiwanese children learn Zhuyin Fuhao, an alphabetic script of 37 symbols. It's taught in the first 10 weeks of grade 1. You're not permitted to teach any Taiwanese characters during this time, and then after 10 weeks, the children start learning the Hanzi characters via Zhuyin. So on the right side of the Hanzi characters in primary school, here's my character, and here it's written in Zhuyin. Okay, so knowing Zhuyin thus helps children pronounce new characters without assistance from the teacher. Okay, beginners' orthographies are powerful self-teaching tools. That's why Japanese Year 1 classrooms, it's fine for them to have 37 children, okay? Because the children are confident, independent, self-teaching learners. Okay, now English beginners' orthographies at age 5, okay, they really seemed, so that was still doing it with kids young. You know, if we used a beginner's orthography, we wouldn't need that change 9 about starting when kids are older. But I think we should do both. 1, because let's be kind to our children. Our children should be playing. But 2, because the transition would be an interesting and complex time, given how our systems work. And so doing them both would be wonderful, because starting later, you know, if we said middle of grade 2 is when we start formal learning to read and write, and probably numeracy too. Prior to then, of course, we'd be doing lots of play-based stuff. We too, like Finland, might have 2/3 of our children already reading when that happened, but it would have been done in play-based learning. So we wouldn't be blocking kids, but we'd be doing lots of science, early maths. I mean, wow. Number blocks for maths, and you know, the TV show that the kids are addicted to now, which builds wonderful learning. You know, there's so much science, maths and subject area learning that we could cover, okay, whilst the kids were building the cognitive processing skills they need, because guess what, that they improve impressively from 4.5 through to 7.5. Yeah, and we would just make things easier, and we'd have that 2.5 years for readiness, getting kids ready. We'd be able to pick up the kids with language disorder and be building the sub skills that they need. We could do so much. At present, our kids start school and teachers have to hit the ground running, and there is no time to sort things out before learning starts. Kids start to lose heart, acquired helplessness, and down we go. But have a look at this for ITA. Now, ITA was massive, okay? The English researchers, Anglophone researchers, they were watching the Asian nations, and they could see how incredibly successful it was. And so this led to, because in the 40s and 50s there'd been a lot on spelling reform, but now things moved to, let's do a beginner's orthography. So massive amounts of research were done with ITA. They did the research, they chose one and said, let's research using this one, okay? And they just found that it really worked. And if you read somewhere that ITA didn't work, do track back, because in almost all where I've found them, when you track back, you will find hearsay, okay? You will not find research studies. When you actually go and look at the research, and by geez, it's available just on eric.gov and what have you, you find overwhelmingly that it was very helpful. And we'll look through some of that now. Okay, so this is from Warburton and Southgate's. It was published in 1969, but they did the review in 1966, and it was a review of 1,500 UK schools that were using ITA, because it just proliferated, because there were project schools and they used a rather neat design. This class will do ITA, this class will do standard English, and we'll just compare the outcomes, you know. Yeah, but all the other schools that were watching said, well, can we do it too? Okay, and so it just grew, okay, and what have you. But yeah, their comment, and they interviewed teachers and they looked at the research studies and what have you, okay. So even the youngest, most delayed child can have a go. Children feel on top of it instead of struggling. The shutters don't go down when the child meets a word he doesn't know. He'll try it. One doesn't now find children in the middle of infant school who have, as it were, given up. Oh my goodness, teachers, you know those kids, don't you? Those children in the middle of infant school, prep now in Queensland and most Australian states, yeah, who have, as it were, given up, okay? Even if a child is going slowly, he feels he is making progress. And this is what I see when I go to schools in Wales, in Finland and what have you, okay? We don't see the learned helplessness, the acquired helplessness that our kids experience, okay? And once that sets in, we are in trouble. And is there much research on this? No. Do we need it? Yes. Let me give you an example. visiting a school in Wales, and Spencer and Hanley's studies are great. They compared Welsh and English cohorts. Welsh is regular, English is far from it. And their original studies were done in two schools in the same village, and what have you. Here we start with Welsh, here we start with English, whereas now there are schools and they just have strands, here's the strand that's doing English first, so they learn to read in English and then they start to learn Welsh as a second language and read Welsh, and vice versa. Okay, but, and I have just got off my train of thought, and I'm talking to the learning support teacher and having just looked at a kid in grade 2 who was reading Harry Potter. Now that's pretty good. Okay, and so I said, well, what do you do for learning support? And the teacher says, well, they come down and we get them to read a small book with us, and then we choose 5 words from the book. And we say to the child, this is your 5 words for the week. Now, Welsh words are very long too. Okay, and I'm thinking, how naive. Okay, I've had a series of shocks over time where I'm the naive one, but I'm thinking that I'm the one who knows. And I say to the teacher, don't you find that once you've told them the 5 words that the child just remembers them? And the teacher goes, no. As if to say, what a strange question. Aha. And then you see they can trust the text. The children will practice those words because the letters are trustworthy and they can read the words. Our kids can't trust the text because they're not sure if it's going to be a word like O-N-E, it says one, W-U-N, one, or what have you. Okay, and because our kids can't trust the text, they guess by the colour on the flashcard, by it being on the second bottom line in the grid they're reading, by this, and see, in effect, they're practicing non-word reading strategies that derail them. Whereas in a regular orthography, even the slower learners can trust it. So they're a little bit delayed, but they get there, so one doesn't now find children in the middle of infant school who have, as it were, given up. Even if a child is going slowly, he feels he is making progress, and he is. And can I give you another one and it's from Warburton and Southgate. There was a school principal, and she would get the children to come down, the weaker readers, to come down and read to her. And she found with the standard English cohort, they'd come in and they'd read the practice page, and as they got to the end, they'd start edging towards the door because they're worried that she might turn the page over and ask them to read some more. Okay? Whereas the ITA kids were the opposite. They'd come in and proudly read them their page and are really keen to turn over that page and show them how well they could read this text that they've never even seen before. See that difference, and what have you. Okay, so Warburton and Southgate's review, the majority of teachers interviewed appeared to consider the change in children's attitudes to reading to be at least as important or even more important than the increased in progress in reading. We need to be researching word reading development. We need to be researching a success inoculation, what happens when children are successful, versus acquired helplessness, which is the default path. If you don't experience ongoing success, you will move into acquired helplessness and feel inadequate and have depressive symptoms, etc. Oh dear. And here's just some quotes, okay, from Warburton and Southgate. Children don't get blockages as they did with traditional orthography. One doesn't now find children in the middle of infant school who have, as it were, given up. Yep, we had that one. I thought I had some others there, but no, maybe later. Regular orthographies are powerful intervention tools, okay? So the Asian nations use them for adult literacy and for intervention, and ITA was the same. It was used for beginners and it was used for intervention. And it was also used for adults. Okay, so here's a study, Pittman, 1973, study of UK soldiers who were struggling readers. They made impressively rapid reading and writing progress. They transitioned well to standard English. They made strong social, emotional and citizenship gains. They realised they'd been thinking, I'm dumb, I'm hopeless, and what have you. And they realised, oh my goodness, I can do, wow, maybe I can, and they'd reversed that acquired helplessness. And now they were thinking, well, what else can I do? And the rapid success rate induces more controlled emotional responses and gain in self-respect. The students gain self-confidence and a new awareness and independence. The striking increase in morale fosters motivation. There is a surprising carryover of ability and confidence to arithmetical attainment. The men concerned have become more cooperative and less antisocial, better citizens and more proficient soldiers. We need that success. Paulo Freire, his literacy empowerment similarly used a highly regular orthography. Okay, so ITA stopped, the research stopped halfway through because whole language was sweeping the world at that time in the late 1960s, and it said reading comprehension is going to be the answer to everything. Okay, and I think everyone felt a bit embarrassed that they'd been doing orthographies and word reading when clearly it wasn't needed, because reading comprehension was going to solve all our problems, meaningful reading. And of course, whole language then crashed on the rocks of too many struggling readers, schools being too busy, and what have you. What a shame they didn't marry. Okay, but whole language that was then replaced in Australia and other nations too by the socio-cultural model, which built very largely from Paulo Freire's work, because he did wonderful work with Brazilian peasants, having them quickly become literate, and then they too became advocates for socio-political emancipation. Okay, but the people developing the socio-cultural model didn't look at the fact that anyone can learn to read Brazilian Portuguese. It's highly regular, and what was happening before was a quiet helplessness. I can't do it, you know. And Paulo Freire, he used explicit instruction to show that yes, you can, and off you go. So key learnings from Freire's work: 1, literacy is empowering for socio-political emancipation in Brazil. You know, for reading your Bible. I mean, so many regular orthographies across the world were developed by missionaries and what have you, so that people could quickly learn to read the Bible and what have you. So it's empowering for whatever purposes you choose to use it for. And the second one, teach word reading strategically and explicitly using isolated words and word parts, which has been an interesting aspect of our reading wars. But Freire used word parts and isolated words. And this is from my writing I've done there. Freire taught word reading explicitly, okay, and quoting from his book, teaching men how to read and write a syllabic language like Portuguese means showing them how to grasp critically the way its words are formed so that they themselves can carry out the creative play of combinations. And he used drills with words and word parts, but he started with meaningful words, okay, and it happened quickly because it was Brazilian Portuguese. Everyone made progress, and on they went. They had that moment. I can't read to, oh my goodness, I can. Oh, and I can read this. Oh, I can write. You know, wow, so empowering. Okay, so here's his drills. So meaningful, relevant words, and I think he usually found 15 to 18 words was all that was needed for the drill. Okay, for example, the word favela, which means slum. So you go favela, and then you break it into its syllables, fa-ve-la, and then practicing 3 times each, fa, fi, fi, fo, fu, which is the 5 vowels, okay, va, vi, vi, vo, fu, la, li, la, lo, lu, fa, ve, la. Okay, really worked. And we probably should not have built a socio-cultural model thinking that empowerment and building confidence was so important, when really, when push comes to shove, do help people learn to read. Okay, and yep, this is just from the abstract. I'm just going to move on here. Let's have a look at that studies. We're going to look at some studies there which are discussed in the research tours. So this is Seymour, Arrow and Erskine, Foundation Literacy Acquisition in European Orthographies. So it was word reading in 14 European nations, and they did rather simple tests of reading letter sounds, real words and unfamiliar words, so pseudo words, lists of them at the end of grade 1. And they found children in 10 nations with highest regularity, 90 to 98% accuracy, and probably much, and they made the comment that they were actually highly accurate long before the end of grade 1, okay? But the UK cohort, only 31% accuracy at the end of grade 1, and then I'll say it quickly, and you just think, oh yeah, only 69% accuracy at the end of grade 2. But now let's look at the workload impacts, you know? A whole year of teaching and learning. You think of all that's gone into reading, spelling, writing, and they still haven't even nearly caught up, you know. And we've got, and this is in the book too, but it's also in an article that Emeritus Professor Bruce Knight and I wrote, Effective Literacy Instruction for All Students, A Time for Change. And if you just have a look at that, the table, so see we've got our extremely regular nations, Finland, Greece, Italy, Spain, Austria, Germany, Norway, Iceland, and they're just examples of a nation. There's lots of others with regular orthographies. 96.7%, down to 90%, they're doing well. And then we've got our highly regular, and then we've got our moderately regular, and our highly complex English at the bottom. And so we included year 2 for those ones, okay? And these ones had caught up, but at the end, a year later, but we were still miles down. But if you look at the age in that table, you'll really see the difference too. Our children should be playing. So Finland, the age at the end of grade 1 is 7.9, okay? A 2.3 year difference to the UK kids. And the UK kids, same as Australia, so they were 5.6 at the end of grade 1 versus 7.9. So 2.3 years older, 1.2, yep, okay. Our children should be playing, and we should not be asking such complex learning. We do not ask our children to learn complex fractions and numbers to 1,000 when they're 4.5 to 5, but we're asking them to read and write English. They're pretty similar, okay, and what have you. Now, Spencer and Hanley's studies of Welsh and English cohorts, very useful to read. And this would be a very easy study to replicate, and so would the Seymour, Arrow and Erskine one. Okay, just simply doing it again with kids in your nation and comparing it and what have you. Okay, so, and what we found with the Welsh versus English, and so they published articles about the kids early and then end of grade 2 and then in grade 5, okay? So the regular orthography cohort, they learned to read Welsh, okay? Much stronger word reading in grades 1, 2 and 5, strong phonemic awareness from grade 1, okay? Same as the Finnish kids, same as the Taiwanese children, okay? Strong phonemic awareness as soon as you learn those letter sounds and start, okay? And very few weak readers, okay? And then we look at our English readers, learning to read English, okay? At-risk readers develop severe word reading difficulties. And see, really good control study. These kids growing up in the same village, so much is similar, and the key difference is learning to read Welsh versus learning to read English. Okay, now this is important. Phonemic awareness still weak in grade 5, because phonemic awareness, spelling ability, and reading unfamiliar words travel together. A 3-stranded rope. You cannot improve phonemic awareness if your word reading and your spelling are still developing. And similarly, you can't develop word reading as a splinter skill. In rare exceptions you can, but what have they travel together. And so see, our kids start to develop phonemic awareness earlier because we start reading instruction earlier, okay? But our kids are still miles behind, still having significantly weak phonemic awareness in grade 5, okay? Whereas the Welsh kids were very strong from grade 1. Okay, and there's that one, an alarming spread of English weak readers. And Hanley and what have you, they talk about this tail. I call it a long, sad tail that's dragging behind, but they call about this tail of lower achievers in the English readers that's simply not there for the Welsh readers. Yeah. Okay. Our kids with intellectual disability, our most vulnerable citizens, okay, are they the worst victims of how we currently are doing early literacy? Let's start with standard English. Okay, we could make literacy development so much easier. Okay, and here it's not a study comparing, it's not a single study, but I'm using Kossiu's study of Italian children versus Groen et al. 2006, and they studied children, but the article's called A Child with Exceptional Reading Ability, okay? But that article is an interesting read, and it includes data from other studies of English readers who have Down syndrome. So let's look at this one first. One child reading well, okay? Most were at low levels, and 30% of the control group were omitted, had to be dropped because they were unable to score on the tests, okay? Now, really, yeah, that's the situation in Australian schools, okay? And what have you. And lists other studies showing similarly, okay? Very similar. And they call it exceptional reading for one child to be reading at age level, okay? Whereas here, Kossiu's study, high word reading accuracy, 94% for real words, 88% for unfamiliar words, and we actually visited them, okay? And one of their chief challenges was difficulty finding subjects who weren't already highly accurate, okay, because the kids with Down syndrome learn to read steadily. Now, we're going to have a slightly longer look at that. But this was a pivotal moment in my learning, okay, because Giuseppe Cosio made a comment in another book, Cosio 1999, and he said, because word reading and intelligence aren't needed to learn to read and write, to learn to read, you know, and I went, what? And so I went to Professor Bruce and said to him, Bruce, we have to go, because either, like the research, reading the research is showing that this is how it is, okay, but I just can't get it. I can't conceptualize it. We have to go and look. And so Bruce hunted far and wide and found some research funding, and we went and we visited, researchers, so Seymour Arrow and Erskine and, you know, Wales, and yep, you know, it was wonderful, and we learned so much. And yes, it was true. Sense intelligence and working memory aren't needed for learning to read and write if you learn a beginner's orthography first up, if you have a fully regular orthography. Okay, and here's a bit of text from that article. Sorry, this is text from my research tours, because I discuss it. Okay, tour 3, so it's a number of tours on different topics. Okay, Giuseppe Cosio in this and his team show this gentle, easy word reading development in their research on Italian children with Down syndrome learning to read. The children they studied had severe intellectual disabilities, so mean IQ of 44, IQ range of 40 to 56, so that is severely low intelligence, okay? But they mastered word reading relatively easily, correctly reading 93.8% of real words, 88% of pseudo words, so unfamiliar words, which we use to test reading of unfamiliar words. Speaking with Professor Cosio and our CQU team visited researchers in schools in Italy, one big challenge in setting up the study was finding children with Down syndrome who weren't yet reading well, because word reading development happens quite easily for Italian children with intellectual disability. Same in Finland, okay? Grapho game is used down to IQ, routinely is used down to IQ 50, okay? And quite likely with some lower kids who are below that too. Yes, and the comment in the study, they were reading as well as healthy progress grade 2 students. So grade 2 students in Italy are virtually completely accurate for reading, okay, except for a few exception words, but they are not as fluent as grade 4 Italian readers, and what have you, so yes. Okay. Now let's compare children with dyslexia, children with weak readers, okay, German versus English, and this is Landl, Wimmer and Thrift. And now if you've been noticing, you may find these studies are quite old, okay? There is value in repeating these studies, replicating them and see what results are found, okay? And you can either replicate them by finding another nation and working with that nation in cooperative research, or simply by contacting the researchers, asking if you can have the word lists that they use for the English readers and doing them with Australian readers, or, you know, in your nation. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, the regular orthography cohort, German, okay, the standard English, let's do this one first. Highly accurate reading of both real words and unfamiliar words. They could read 3-syllable pseudo words, so what have we got? I can't even see it, quadutrish and what have you, bit tiny, okay, highly accurately. They could read those, okay, better than the English cohort could read 1-syllable pseudo words such as foo and bish. That's a big difference, hey, because this is German weak readers. And see, they often use the criteria for weak readers of being weak on reading long less than 90% accuracy for reading long pseudo words, you know, long multisyllabic pseudo words. Now, I mean, most of our grade 5 kids would fail that. Okay, English readers, okay, severely weak word reading with many at very low levels. Major weakness on real words and pseudo words. Major weakness on vowels. Boy, do we have vowels. See, our consonants are relatively, in most words, regular, but our vowels are shocking, what have you. So we tend to use words like statistical learning and executive function skills. Now they'll be the words for the next 2 decades, and what have you. And regular orthographies create low demands on executive function skills, okay, and they expedite statistical learning, strong learning, reliable learning, okay, success, whereas English impedes that statistical learning, okay, particularly in vulnerable children, but in all children. That's why it's taking our children so long to master word reading and spelling. Okay, major weakness on vowels, 16 times more vowel errors. So this was for the first vowel errors in the first syllable of words. Okay, so 342 errors in the English cohort, 20 in the German cohort. It's really interesting, isn't it? Okay, Finnish versus English, response to intervention. Okay, and 2 of 14, look at most studies. We are not looking at what are often termed treatment resistors and non-responders. Okay, most studies, or most intervention studies, have a group of children who make very poor progress. And if you think back to that graph, they're the ones who are down at the bottom there. Okay, and they clog our schools, poor darlings, and overwhelm resources needed for supporting them. Okay, because we're starting with standard English. Okay, I think. Okay, research is needed. But here I'm just comparing them generally, but it's really worth a read, that 2 of 14, and you look at the ease of intervention in regular orthography nations and how kids do catch up and to adult level and what have you, okay, and how we are so struggling, and what you find is the researchers, like most word reading research, is done by psychologists, okay. But when you look at the psychologists who are speaking out on this and talking about how, look, that the weak kids are not making progress and this, you almost invariably find they started with a teaching background. It's people who work with kids, and I've worked with kids for 40 years. I work one-on-one with children with learning difficulties and their families. So I'm largely an independent researcher, and I support my research by my work as a speech pathologist and teacher and educational specialist working with kids with difficulties. Okay, so yes, the people who work with the kids know. That's why we need to have groups. I really feel it would be so powerful to have groups of teachers visiting and do studies of those teachers visiting and what they find. Who knows, our teachers' unions might fund some of that. And what have you. Okay, so we find, and this is from the Grapho Game research, okay, so Luton and what have you, that's Professor Hakey. So weakest word readers catch up to adult level with relatively minimal intervention. For example, Grapho Game, most children by or in grade 2, those with severe difficulties by grade 4, long before our kids are reading and writing well. Standard English cohorts, even with highly intensive ongoing intervention, most children make gains, but not to age level, and an appreciable number make very limited progress. And what you also find is, if you check the kids 6 months after intervention, okay, regular orthography kids, they're still going strong, okay? English cohorts, drops, Studies of treatment resistors, we're talking 2 years of daily half-hour intervention by an expert, and still we have kids who are making very poor progress, okay? And as Jackie French would say, there are no such thing as reading difficulties. There are only teaching challenges. Perhaps we need change to be it children being older, be it let's explore beginners orthographies, because the evidence is there on how effectively they work. Okay, and back to the ITA. Okay, the initial teaching alphabet research is very impressive. Okay, and this is 2 of 5. It's quite a long tour because you will find it very interesting reading. Okay, and if we look at the regular orthography cohorts, okay, which is the kids in the ITA classes, initial teaching alphabet, and here's the standard English, or traditional orthography, they called it in those days. Okay, that's the term that I've just used, standard English. Yeah, okay. Okay, so for our ITA cohort, results very much in keeping with more recent studies of children in regular orthography nations. Now, you can read my books, you can download articles that I have read from ResearchGate. If you look at my profile there, ResearchGate, you can put a final draft copy of articles there, and you can download them free. And while you're there, if you were to download one Knight, Galletly and Gargett 2017 that talks about cognitive load, don't be careful about printing it. It's 48 pages long. But if it compares, it says, here's our English struggles. Here is the research on regular orthographies in recent decades, regular orthography nations. And here is the ITA research with a whole lot of research questions, questions that need answering also included. It's worth reading. Okay, so sorry, reading down again. Chook. So ITA results very much in keeping with more recent studies of children in regular orthography nations, reading and writing developing much faster and more easily, transitioning done easily. In fact, they just say they were worried about how transitioning would go. They just found it an absolute non-event. I mean, it didn't mean that the kids mastered English spelling straight away, but they transitioned into using just standard English for reading books and what have you. And similarly, Jane Anderson and people with the ITA Foundation in Minnesota, America's ITA Foundation. I'm going to be doing some work there when I'm in America next. And yeah, she says transitioning is just a non-event. It just happens so easily. Okay, very few weak word readers. Teacher workload lowered as children were confident, independent readers. And if we look at the standard English cohort, results very much in keeping with more recent studies. Much slower early literacy development, large numbers of struggling readers, many with severe difficulties, teachers very busy supporting children's reading and writing. And I've included some studies here. There is masses of ITA research. So if you just go to, we'll use the old HTTPS, but it's eric.ed.gov and Google initial teaching alphabet, okay? And dig deeper when you see articles criticising ITA, and you usually find it's just hearsay. Okay, now let's explore one giant ITA study of American children. So Mazurkowitz reports on an 11-year study of 14,000 children in Pennsylvania, half in ITA classes, half in standard English classes. The findings are highly in keeping with other ITA studies, what have you. ITA was highly effective with at-risk read children. So Mazurkowitz discusses 3 times more standard English children repeating a year level due to low achievement, twice as many standard English children receiving remedial intervention, definite differences in remedial needs, ITA kids needing support only with comprehension but not word reading, they're going fine with that, standard English children needing intervention in both areas. The ITA children were much stronger readers. 8 months into grade 1, only 6% of the standard English cohort were reading above grade level. Now, I'm surprised it wasn't higher. Reading grade 2 or 3 reading materials. The ITA cohort were far ahead. So the top 25% reading grade 3 materials, the middle, so this is grade 1 kids, the middle 50% of kids reading grade 2, 15% reading grade 1, and they had some delayed kids, 11% reading below grade level. But if it was like all other studies, they would have been still progressing steadily and effectively. Okay, the ITA children were much stronger writers. Okay, and this is quotes from there. I'm not quite sure. Some of these quotes are going to be from Mazurkowitz and some will be from Warburton and Southgate. The most dramatic flowering of all is evident in the large numbers of free, self-expressive 6-year-old writers. They write more abundantly and about many more subjects than do children learning the traditional alphabet. They write alone, see, independent self-teaching. They write alone without help or editing from teachers, sounding out their own spellings and using any words they feel like using in any sentence pattern that occurs to them. Workload was reduced and teaching was empowered. More quotes. The long uphill grind has been cut out. Reading is more an ordinary part of childhood instead of a chore, and so the children take it in their stride. They pick up a book in their free time as they would a paintbrush or jigsaw. That is the regular orthography story. And you will notice that if you track back, Montessori, Reggio Emilia, and what have you, and I write more on this in book 3. Those, Steiner, okay, they're all from regular orthography nations where children learn to read quickly and on it goes. Whereas see, Steiner, Reggio Emilia and Montessori work beautifully up until school, but then the pressure comes on and standard English and teachers can't fit it all in because it's too big a workload with too high cognitive load, particularly for at-risk kids. Okay, sorry, let's go back to the second quote. The teacher with many years' experience in first grade feels that an ITA approach answers the first grade teacher's cry that there must be an easier way of teaching reading. Have you heard that, Layla? Okay, guess what? There is. Okay. The first grade teacher's complaint about what to do with the other children when working with one group seems no longer to be a problem in ITA classes. And they talk about, because in those days, it was the kids would line up in a long line to come and get help from the teacher with reading. Okay, the long lines of children searching for help aren't there in the ITA classes. While learning may start with whole class activity, this disappears in a short time in favour of individualised activity based on the rates of learning of individual children. The facts are in. Okay, let's summarise. Currently, Anglophone nations are mismanaging English orthographic complexity rather badly. Okay, it is not the orthography; it is how we manage its complexity for our children when they learn a initially learning to read and write, and across that early literacy. Okay, the problem is not English orthographic complexity, it is how we manage it, that complexity. Like Taiwanese, Japanese and Chinese standards, we mismanage it appallingly. Times past, they had excessive struggling readers and illiterate adults. Then they added their beginners' orthographies, Taiwan Zhuyin Fuhao, Hiragana, Pinyin. Now very few struggling readers, widespread high literacy, widespread economic improvement, widespread lots. That evidence has been there since the 1950s, okay? Or no, 1960s, okay? The evidence of no, I apologise. That evidence has been there since the 1950s of how successful two-stage early literacy was in China, Japan, Taiwan and Korea, okay? But the initial teaching alphabet research, ITA research of the 1960s grew out of that awareness, and these Asian nations made progress, okay? So we are only, 6 to 7 decades behind, and we might laugh, but we'll be 15 decades behind if we don't actually look at this, look at the research, explore it, okay? Blindspots, Bunyips, okay, they are there, okay. ITA and sadly missed opportunities, okay? ITA research ended when whole language was sweeping the world. Meaningful reading was going to be the answer to all our prayers, okay? And how sad it is that we didn't integrate the two, okay? They would have been a winning combination, okay? The language enrichment side of whole language was simply bliss, okay? But the struggling word readers continued, okay? There would have been few word reading and spelling difficulties. There would have been rapid, easy early literacy development. The children would have been confident, independent readers, writers, self-teachers. Schools would have been time-rich, teacher workloads very manageable, ample time for great literacy and learning enrichment. So the decades have gone by, but guess what? The opportunities are still there. Okay, and there we have the potential of the 10 changes. And I'm just going to wind it up now. Okay, it really is good news. Okay, when you consider the research, just shows, wow, we could do this too. Wow. Okay, they're not major changes. And at the end of 2 or 6, I talk about the roads we might take, for improvement and what have you. Yeah, we've got good options. But I think that, the 2 major changes are, let's look at beginners orthographies and let's look at holding off until mid-year 2, to start formal word reading and spelling and numeracy instruction. Okay, we are a nation. So Australia, but we could also make that, America, England, Ireland, and what have you. Well, actually, Irish is actually regular too. Okay. We are a nation with exciting potential for truly major improvement in early literacy development and education generally if we explore 10 changes issues. Okay, the future is bright. Let's move there to a brighter future because that option is there for us. Okay, now let's consider research, but let's also engage in research. Okay, now there's ample research validating the 10 changes. Okay, but can I encourage you to do research? Now it might just be discussions. Just spread the word, okay? Get people to, let's talk about this. There could be holidays where you visit. There could be school exchanges, Initially, we need to be encouraging our politicians. Do come to our school and look at our week readers. Now, when you have your next visit to this nation, do organise to go and visit a school there, okay? And look at the reading and writing of the weakest 10%. Or third. Okay, so are you thinking of doing your master's or doctoral studies? Okay. And don't panic. People tend to think of research is going to be huge, but invariably you'll go in with, I want to research this, and your supervisor will say, well, hang on, let's narrow that down, okay, to a nice manageable study. You could do it with a colleague, because you might do comparing writing samples with here and Taiwan, okay, and you're going to look at this aspect of the writing, and he's going to look at that aspect of the writing, and and you'll have to go and visit Taiwan, and you'll really enjoy it, what have you. Okay, or whichever nation, that nation where you've got an aunt or where you've got family, okay, and accommodation is easy, okay, be a researcher. It can be informal or it can be formal, okay, but just inquire. Talk to your teachers' unions, things like that. Okay, please consider 10 changes areas. Build the knowledge that we need towards improvement. Okay, we do not want change without research. Okay, And the last chapter, one is called one of the research tours, is called the 100 Research Questions. Okay, it's the final chapter, and it just poses 100 examples of potential studies. Okay, it can be formal, informal, or both, and it can be nicely collegial and include lots of fun. Okay, it's wonderful visiting other nations. Okay, and yeah, it really is good. Okay, have we had some blind spots about orthographies and their impacts? That doesn't sound right, some academics might say. I haven't come across that before. Are you sure? Okay. Yes, I am. Okay. I wasn't sure when I read, I came across Wisdom in a Chemist. Okay, 2001. I'd got 2 awards for my masters for doing a really good job on reading the research on how to help kids with English readers with reading difficulties, and I read nothing on it. And in The Chemist, I read an article, Mish Kerr's article in Time magazine, Blame It on the Written Word. Okay, and it said twice as many readers of English have dyslexia than readers of Italian, and talked about how Italian has so few spelling patterns and English has 1120 using Pulesi's study. And I thought, oh, I've got to be rubbish, but started looking, and you go, oh my goodness. Because prior to then, I had just thought, it must be the same everywhere. But it's not, okay? We're the exception, they're the rule. Okay, so have we some blind spots? It sure seems so. It's an Anglophone thing. We've lots of bunyips in our classroom, and exploring the research can end blind spots because issues become clear. Go and see, or read these studies, and what have you. So a bunyip in the room, an important issue people aren't aware of that's extremely obvious once it's pointed out. A bunyip in the classroom, key education issues well worth considering and exploring. Blind spots grow bunyips. Okay. So I think we've got blind spots and bunyips about orthographies and their impacts, how they ease versus impede learning to read and write, the very high cognitive load our children and teachers live with, very low versus extremely high needs for effective cognitive processing skills, and low versus massive child and teacher workload. How hard is it to explore research? Okay, reading the research tools, not hard at all. I really recommend it to you. It's a very cheap ebook. Okay, it's a great academic text, but it's an uncomplicated, chatty read. It's written to appeal to general readers as much as academics. Okay, useful discussion, helpful diagrams, no requirement for research or stats expertise, that sort of thing. Please do reflect on the 10 changes. Let's whiz through them again. 1, understand how orthographies matter. English spelling is dragging us down badly in so many ways. 2, own our struggling reader woes. End hypocrisy and pretense. 3, weigh workload. Our children and teachers are working far too hard. 4, one-size education does not fit all. Teach to the decidedly different instructional needs of upper third and lower third readers. 5, end our data deficiency. Build strong knowledge on word reading levels. 6, enrich every child. Ensure effective, supportive, tailored education. The education our children are promised that they're not receiving. 7, insist on easy literacy development. Reach regular orthography nations' achievement levels. Ethically, aren't our children entitled to it? To achieve the level of literacy that is routinely achieved in every school across nations such as Taiwan, China, Japan, and what have you. 8, investigate the potential of fully regular beginners orthographies. They are winners. 9, play to learn first. Let's have our children play. Start standard English word reading instruction from mid-year 2. 2.5 years of readiness and enrichment first. And 10, build needed research knowledge as quickly as possible and use collaborative school-based research. We are a nation in need of major improvement. Fortunately, working strategically, we are also a nation with excellent potential to achieve that improvement. And this is what I write on the inside cover of every book that I autograph, okay? Well, actually, this is what I put in Bunyips, the first book, okay? That child development and education across Australia might be eased and enhanced. But in the research tours, which will have a wider international spread of use, okay, I write, hang on, that child development and education across Australia and the Anglosphere might be eased and enhanced. Okay, the future is bright. Let's move there. Okay, thank you very much. Okay,